The millionaire went to destroy her farm, but what she did changed him forever. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and when the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The gravel road twisted through the countryside like a memory, old, familiar, and stubbornly unchanged despite time. Late summer wind moved through the fields, stirring rows of tall corn and the sweet scent of hay. The air was warm, humming with cicadas, carrying the slow rhythm of a place that didn't hurry for anyone. But the black SUV that sped down that road did not belong to this rhythm. It moved too fast, too loud, too sure. Inside, Ethan Cole leaned forward in the driver's seat, jaw tight, eyes focused. He wasn't used to dirt roads. He was used to asphalt, wide lanes, predictable turns, lines drawn to obey his pace. Everything in his life obeyed his pace, his voice, his decisions. This road didn't. The SUV dipped suddenly where the ground sloped, and a cloud of dust swallowed the windshield. Ethan cursed under his breath, steadying the wheel. He was here for one reason: land. The last piece of land needed to complete his development project, a state-of-the-art agricultural facility that would triple his company's value in the region. Only one property stood in the way. One farm. One owner. The locals had warned him, "She won't sell." He didn't believe in things like can't, and he never heard no twice. He adjusted his grip on the wheel, steering around a curve, and suddenly, a pickup truck shot into view ahead. Too fast, tires skidding loose gravel. Sliding into his lane, Ethan hit the brakes. Hard. The SUV jerked violently. Tires screamed. The pickup swerved sideways. Dust exploded around them. For a split second, it felt like the world stopped. Then everything went still. Both vehicles had halted, barely an arm's length apart. The pickup's door flew open first. A young woman jumped out, boots hitting gravel with a crack of force. She walked straight toward the SUV, no hesitation, no fear. Broad daylight fell on her. Sun-touched skin. A loose chambray work shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Jeans worn at the knees. Hair tied back in a messy ponytail that somehow still looked strong, not careless. Her eyes, sharp and steady, locked on Ethan. He stepped out slowly, controlled, his expression unreadable. Dust clung to the cuffs of his suit pants. The sun flashed against his watch. Polished, expensive, foreign here. The woman didn't blink. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped, breath quick, voice full of heat that came from fear turned instantly into anger. "You don't drive these roads like that. You could have killed somebody." Her words were fire, but not wildfire. Fire with purpose. Ethan's voice was calm, level, cold water over flames. "You came around the bend too fast." Her eyes widened. Disbelief, offense, fury layered in 1 second. "I know this road. I grew up on it," she said. "You obviously didn't." She took in his suit, the car, the polished everything. He took in her calloused hands, the dirt beneath her boots, the steadiness in her stance. 2 worlds, 2 languages, 2 lives colliding in dust and sunlight. "Are you hurt?" Ethan asked. "No," she said immediately. "But that's not the point." "It's the point to me." He said it simply, not kindly, just honest. She wasn't expecting honesty. It threw her for half a heartbeat, just one. Then she regrouped. "You can't drive like you own the place." He didn't answer. Because in his world, he usually did. A breeze swept across the fields, bending the corn in a long whisper. A hawk circled overhead. Somewhere far, a dog barked. The silence stretched. "Your truck is in poor condition," Ethan observed finally. "The lack of tire tread contributed to your skid." The girl stepped closer, boots crunching gravel. "Don't talk about my truck." Her voice went lower. Steadier. More dangerous for it. "I keep it running myself. Every day. With my own hands. That truck works for its living. Just like I do." Ethan held her gaze. No one held his gaze like that. Not board members, not shareholders, not senators. No one. But she did, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He felt something shift. Not soften, just shift. "What's your name?" he asked. Her jaw tightened, then lifted. Claire Walker. The name fit here. It felt like open fields and early mornings and work that didn't end when the sun went down. "And you?" she said, though her eyes showed she already knew. "Ethan." "Cole." She let out a breath. Slow, heavy, like his name confirmed a story she already hated. Of course she knew who he was. His company had been trying to buy this entire valley for months, and there was one last piece of land left, her farm. "You came for the property," she said. Not a question, not surprise. "Yes." "Well?" Her voice didn't tremble, didn't waver. "You wasted your time, because it's not for sale." Ethan didn't move. Not a blink, not a shift. His calmness was its own kind of violence. "I don't walk away from deals," he said quietly. "And I don't sell my family's home," she answered just as quietly. The wind rushed through the corn again. The world held both of them in its breath. Claire stepped back, not in retreat, in ending. "We're done here," she said, and turned. She got into her truck, started the engine, pulled back onto the road. The dust rose behind her like a curtain closing. Ethan stood in the road, looking after her long after she was gone. His assistant climbed out of the passenger seat of the SUV, nervous, adjusting his tablet. "Sir." "That was the owner." "I know, so what's the plan now?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the empty road. "Now?" he said softly. "Now we don't negotiate." He didn't explain further, because he didn't have to. Something had already happened that he hadn't planned for. The land wasn't the problem. The girl was, and she was not afraid of him. That, more than anything, was new, and Ethan Cole had never, not once, walked away from new. Claire drove with her jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. The road blurred past her, but her mind wasn't on driving. It was on him, his calmness, his eyes that didn't waver, his tone that didn't rise, the way he seemed to expect the world to give way. Not through force, but because it always had. That kind of man was dangerous. She knew what men like that did to land, to families, to entire towns. She had seen it happen just across the county line. Farms leveled, replaced by sterile concrete facilities. Grocery shelves filling with produce shipped in from God knows where, instead of grown by hands that had lived on the land for generations. Hands like hers. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The truck rattled with the pressure. She turned down the long familiar lane leading to the farm. The farmhouse came into view. White paint faded to cream, windows trimmed in peeling forest green. The porch sagged slightly on the left side, and the roof needed patching. But it stood. It had stood for almost 80 years. Her grandparents had built it. Her father had repaired it. And after he died, she kept it alive. She parked near the barn and stepped down, dust settling around her boots. The air smelled like hay and oil and wood that remembered every season of its life. A dog barked, Scout, old, slow, but loyal as sunrise. He trotted toward her, tail wagging in a lazy sweep. She knelt, rubbing his head, her breath finally loosening a little. "I know," she murmured. "I know. I'm okay." But her voice was thinner than she wanted. She stood and looked over the land. Fields stretched wide, sun dipping low, shadows long. The place looked peaceful. Perfect. Untouched. But she knew how close it was to being taken. She'd been fighting for months. Letters, meetings, county hearings. And every time the offers increased. As if loyalty had a price. As if memories, graves, laughter, storms weathered in the barn loft could be calculated on a spreadsheet. She didn't fear work. She didn't fear debt. She didn't fear weather, but she feared losing home. And men like Ethan Cole, they didn't stop. She exhaled once, steadying herself, then went inside. The house creaked in welcome, wood sighing gently, as if tired but loyal. Meanwhile, miles away, Ethan sat in a quiet booth of the town's only diner. The diner felt like a place frozen in time. Checkered floor, counter stools with cracked vinyl, a chalkboard menu over the register where the handwriting leaned just a little to the right. Conversations were low, easy. People knew each other here, which meant they noticed him instantly. A stranger, in a suit, in a town where most people wore denim, canvas, and the dirt of their work. He didn't care. But he observed. A waitress approached. Middle-aged, kind-eyed, cautious the way small-town people are around unfamiliar things. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Coffee?" Ethan replied. "Black." She nodded and left. His assistant sat across from him, fidgeting. "Sir, we should try another approach," the assistant said quietly. "The development board is already questioning the delay. Investors are asking for a timeline." "I don't care what they're asking," Ethan said. Voice low, controlled. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The assistant swallowed and nodded. Ethan looked out the window. The fields beyond town seemed endless, golden, alive, the kind of alive that couldn't be trimmed to fit a blueprint. He didn't understand land like that, not yet, but he understood resistance. And the girl, Claire Walker, she didn't resist from pride or stubbornness. She resisted from love. That made her unpredictable. The waitress returned with the coffee and placed it in front of him. "Are you staying in town long?" It was a casual question, friendly, but also not. "Depends what you want. Until I finish my business," Ethan said. The waitress's eyes flickered. Ah, she knew exactly which business. "Well," she said, not unkindly, just real. "I hope you don't intend to take what doesn't want to be taken." Ethan didn't respond, because something inside him, something he didn't like examining, had paused. Was he here to take? To build? To prove something? He wasn't sure anymore. Later, after dusk, the town got quiet. Lights flickered off house by house. The stars. He didn't like not being sure. Later, after dusk, the town got quiet. Lights flickered off house by house. The stars came out clearer than any sky Ethan had seen in years. The city he lived in never got dark enough for that. He stood outside his SUV, looking up. The night smelled like grass, crickets, a faint chill. And for the first time in a long time, there was no noise, no vibration of his phone, no meeting, no voice demanding something. Just sky. He should have felt peace. He didn't. He felt unsettled. He drove to the edge of the Walker property, stayed in the car. The fields glowed silver under moonlight. The farmhouse had a single warm light in the kitchen, glowing soft as a watchful heart. Claire was inside that light. He didn't know why he cared enough to look, just that he did. Inside the house, Claire washed dishes slowly, hands moving automatically, mind somewhere far and sharp. She paused. A feeling ran through her, like she was being watched. She dried her hands, turned off the light, moved to the window, but by then, the black SUV was already gone, just the road. Remained, and the night, and the quiet. But something had changed, for both of them, because neither one had walked away in their heart. They had only begun. The next morning came in slowly, like the light was reluctant to break. Dawn in the countryside didn't erupt. It seeped in. The horizon turned pale lavender first, then peach, then the faintest golden warmth spread across the fields. The dew on the grass shimmered like thousands of tiny stars had fallen to the earth overnight. Claire had been awake long before the sun. She always was. Morning wasn't a choice on a farm. It was a rhythm, a pulse. The world didn't wait for feelings, or for grief, or anger, or exhaustion. It just kept going, and those who wanted to stay had to move with it. She stood by the barn doors, hands on her hips, breathing in the smell of hay and earth. Scout trotted beside her, tail slow and tired but loyal. Her hair was tucked under a cap now, the practical morning version of herself. But even as she moved through familiar motions, something felt different inside her. Off balance, unsettled, and she hated that. Because she knew why. The memory of Ethan Cole standing on that road yesterday was still in her, like a seed she did not ask for and did not want. His expression, his voice, his stillness, his eyes that didn't flinch when hers met them. She cursed under her breath, grabbed a rake, and started the first round of chores with more force than necessary. Work made emotion manageable. Work made pain orderly. Work didn't ask questions. The horses greeted her with snorts and stamps of impatience. She fed them, cleaned stalls, checked the fence line, fixed the trough, pulled weeds by the garden fence. Her muscles knew the movements without asking her mind for permission. But even then, her thoughts found him. Ethan, meanwhile, woke in the town's only motel, a place built in the 70s that hadn't seen renovation since. The walls were painted a tired beige, the air conditioning hummed unevenly, and the carpet had lived through more stories than it wanted to remember. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He didn't usually wake up without an agenda or a clock ticking behind his eyelids. His life was precision. Schedules, calendars, calls starting before sunrise, teams waiting on his decisions. But here, time felt slower, uncooperative, like nothing here knew it was supposed to obey him. He stood, got dressed, jeans today, a plain shirt, as if he was testing something in himself, or perhaps testing the land around him. He ran a hand through his hair, checked his reflection, then looked away from it just as quickly. He didn't like who he saw in mirrors when he wasn't busy. Outside the air was crisp. Birds sang. The wind moved through tall grass like fingers across a piano. He drove toward the Walker farm. Not fast this time. The road wasn't fighting him now, or he wasn't fighting it. When he pulled up by the fence, Claire didn't look surprised. She didn't look pleased either. She just rested her forearm on the rake and stared at him, breathing, sweat on her temple, hair sticking to her neck, sun catching on her jaw. There was something beautiful in it. Not the polished beauty he was used to, but something real, rooted, unmanufactured. She didn't try to look composed. She was composed by life, by necessity, by resilience. "What do you want?" she asked. Not angrily, just tired of the game she assumed he was starting. "To talk," Ethan said. "We already talked." "Not really," she huffed. A short sound, humorless but not hostile. "Look," she said, gripping the rake, grounding herself in work because work made her steady. "I know why you're here. I've known for months. Every neighbor around me already sold to your company. The farms are gone. The pasture by the creek is gone. The apple orchard across the ridge is gone." Her jaw tightened. Her voice didn't break. She wouldn't let it. "But this land," she continued, tapping the rake handle into the dirt, "is my family's. My father was born here. My grandfather built this barn with his own hands. My mother planted that oak tree behind the house when she found out she was pregnant with me. People I love are buried in that ground." Her voice softened, but the softness was grief forged into armor. "You don't get that with money." Ethan didn't interrupt. Her most people talked at him. Over him, around him, no one to him. But she was speaking to him now, and he listened. "My company offers fair compensation," he said, quietly. "Compensation for what?" she shot back. "Losing everything that makes me who I am?" Silence. A wind passed between them again. "You think land is just property?" she said. "But some land holds people, and some people hold land." She went back to raking, ending the conversation in her mind. But Ethan didn't leave. He stepped closer, slowly. Not invading, just presence. "What about debt?" he asked, his voice softer now. Not the voice of a CEO, but the voice of a man who knows something about things breaking. Silently, her hands stilled, her shoulders tensed. He had hit the truth. Claire didn't respond, didn't look at him, which meant, yes, the farm was struggling. He had suspected. The numbers were public, but seeing the truth on her face was different. "I don't need your help," she said. But this time it wasn't anger. It was fear. Fear of depending on anyone. Of losing control, of letting someone in. Fear of breaking. Ethan knew that. Fear. Intimately, deeply, personally. He stepped back. "I'm not here to take your home," he said. She looked up, sharply, suspicion flashing. "Then why are you here?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the fields instead. Wind moving through, them like breath itself. "I want to understand what I'm asking to change," he said. She stared at him like she didn't know whether to laugh or believe him. "You don't just understand. Land like this," she said. "You live it." "Then show me," he said. Her eyes widened, shocked, thrown off balance, indignant, conflicted. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "No," she said finally. "This isn't a lesson." He didn't move. "I'll work," he said simply. "If you let me." She blinked. Ethan Cole, worth hundreds of millions, asking to work. Here, with her. "You're not built for this," she said. "Maybe not," he replied. "But I want to try." Silence. A long silence. Then Claire exhaled. The kind of exhale that is half defeat and half curiosity. "Fine," she said. "But don't expect me to go easy on you." "I don't expect easy," he said. And something small, fragile, nearly invisible, shifted between them, not friendship, not trust, but a beginning. She handed him a pitchfork. It was heavier than anything in his world ever. Was. "Start with the stalls," she said. And Ethan Cole, who had built empires, negotiated billion-dollar contracts, reshaped entire industries, stepped into a barn and began to shovel straw and manure beside a girl who refused to sell him her home. The sun rose higher. The morning stretched. On their breathing eventually found the same rhythm. Work does that. Work breaks many things, but sometimes, it begins to stitch something new. The barn smelled of hay and earth and something older, something that belonged to the ground itself. Sunlight cut in through the high windows in long golden beams, catching dust in midair like slow-falling snow. The horses huffed softly, the gentle sounds of their movements filling the quiet between two people who didn't yet know how to speak to each other without building walls first. Ethan leaned on the pitchfork for a moment, trying to breathe. His shirt clung to him already, sweat forming fast, gathering at the back of his neck, his shoulders under his collar. The air here was thicker, warmer, more real than any boardroom, any penthouse, any conference stage. He hated how much it exhausted him. He hated how weak it made him feel. Claire watched him from where she tightened a halter on a chestnut mare, her movements expert, unthinking. She moved like someone who had known work longer than she had known childhood. No hesitation, no waste of energy. Every gesture clean, efficient. "You can take a break," she said, without looking at him. He stiffened, breath ragged. "I didn't ask for one." "You didn't have to." She finished with the mare and pulled her cap off long enough to wipe her forehead with the back of her wrist. Her hair was damp, a few strands clinging to her skin. She wasn't trying to look graceful. She simply was. Ethan forced himself to lift the pitchfork again, digging into the pile, lifting, dumping. His arms burned. His back ached. His breath was uneven. He had run marathons, climbed mountains, given keynote speeches to thousands. None of that prepared him for the simplicity of manual labor that did not care who he was. Claire didn't tease him. She didn't soften. She didn't praise. She simply let the work define the moment. It was strange, disarming, quietly devastating. After a while she spoke, her voice steady. "You know, the thing about land is, it remembers you." He paused mid-movement, chest rising and falling, and glanced at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was brushing the mare, slow, rhythmic strokes. The horse leaned into her touch, as if understanding something human in her. "My dad used to say that," she continued. "Said the soil holds things, footsteps, mistakes, love, loss, that it gives something back to you only if you give something real to it first." Ethan swallowed. His throat felt too tight. "What did you give it?" he asked. Claire paused. The brush stilled in her hand. "Everything," she said softly. "We all did." Silence settled again. But this time it wasn't sharp. It was full. Ethan's hands tightened on the pitchfork. He worked again, not to prove anything now, just to keep breathing. Time passed. The sun climbed. Their shadows shifted. Eventually, she opened the barn doors to let the light in fully. The fields beyond glowed gold and green, stretching outward in slow waves. Wind tugged at her shirt, lifting it gently against her back. The morning had become afternoon without either of them noticing. "You hungry?" she asked. He didn't realize how much he was until she said it. His stomach felt hollow, his head light. "I could eat," he answered. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes relaxed. Just a fraction. Enough to notice. Enough to show something inside her was adjusting to his presence, even if she didn't want it to. They walked toward the house. Scout trotted alongside, tongue out, tail swaying, as if spent but proud to have been supervising the work of a city boy. The farmhouse wasn't large, but it felt lived in, loved. The porch creaked under their steps. A chipped ceramic mug sat on the railing beside a pot of wild flowers. The screen door had a tear patched in careful stitches rather than replaced. Inside, it smelled of coffee and old books, and the faint memory of something warm baked long ago. Claire moved through the kitchen without speaking. Opening cabinets, retrieving a loaf of homemade bread, slicing tomatoes from a bowl near the window, pulling 2 cold jars of lemonade from the fridge. Everything she touched belonged in her hands. Ethan sat at the small wooden table, round, edges worn smooth by years of elbows and plates, and laughter and arguments, and life. His fingers traced one of the grooves in the surface. "You grew up here," he said quietly. She nodded without looking back. "What about you?" she asked, her voice neutral. He hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he didn't remember the answer feeling like anything. "A house," he said finally. "Modern, glass, steel, everything elegant. Every room perfect." She paused, knife hovering over the bread. "Sounded like a show home." "Pretty close." She glanced over her shoulder at him, just a glance. But it was enough to say she understood. Beautiful things can be empty. She set his plate in front of him. 2 slices of fresh bread. Tomato, lettuce, cheese. Simple, honest, uncomplicated. He stared at it a moment. Not because it was elegant, but because it wasn't. He didn't remember the last time someone made him a meal who didn't have chef in their title. He took a bite, and something inside him stilled. The taste was real, not rich, not fancy, not impressive, just real. His chest tightened unexpectedly. He looked up. Claire wasn't watching him. She was eating her own food, gaze turned toward the window, toward the fields. She didn't care if he approved. He wasn't trying to impress. She was simply living. He had built entire empires trying to chase a feeling she had grown up breathing. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, but they were honest. Claire blinked, a tiny break in her composure. "Yeah," she said quietly. "You're welcome." There was no smile, but something soft moved between them anyway. Outside, the wind shifted. Clouds drifted slow. The day breathed. After they finished eating, she stood, rinsed her plate, and nodded toward the door. "Come on," she said. "We've still got work to do." He followed her. Not because the deal mattered. Not because he needed her land. Not because he had something to prove. But because for the first time in a very long time, he didn't want to be anywhere else. The afternoon sun was different from the morning sun. It pressed harder, leaned heavier, as if testing who would endure and who would yield. Heat rose from the earth, lifting in shimmering waves along the dry path that led from the barn toward the south pasture. Grass swayed lazily. Cicadas hummed their steady midsummer rhythm, the kind that made time move slow and heavy. Claire walked ahead, her boots sure and steady in the dirt, her shoulders easy, her steps neither hurried nor dragging. She carried a coil of fencing wire over one shoulder and a toolbox in the other hand. The fence line out by the edge of the fields had sagged again, the posts leaning just enough to signal work that couldn't be ignored. Ethan followed her. His breathing was steadier now than it had been earlier, but his muscles felt like wood, tight, unfamiliar, resisting his will. Sweat gathered at the base of his spine, soaked into the back of his shirt, ran down along his ribs. His hands, unused to rough tools, were red and raw across the palms. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for a pause. He just walked, Claire noticed. Of course she noticed. Years on this land had taught her to read people by breath and posture, not words. She didn't say anything, though. There was no point in acknowledging struggle. Work was work. The land didn't hand out sympathy. When they reached the leaning fence, she set down the toolbox and crouched by one of the rotted posts. The wood was soft, crumbly at the base, eaten by time and weather. She pressed a palm to it, fingers steady, thoughtful, almost like a doctor assessing a wound. "Storm last week did this," she said. "Wind out here hits different when it's got a full mile of flat fields to run across. Picks up speed, pushes hard." He crouched beside her. The earth smelled warm, alive, with a faint scent of wild sage and dry hay. Claire pulled gloves over her hands, grabbed the post-hole digger, and pushed it into the ground. Muscles rippled under the fabric of her shirt. Not showy strength, not gym strength, but something earned and grown and necessary. Ethan watched her for a moment. Not like a man looks at a woman, but like someone seeing something unfamiliar. Something worth understanding. She dug. He took the other pair of gloves and dug with her, the sound of wood biting, earth. The breath pulled in. The weight shifted. The soil lifted. And again, work found them both. After a while, Claire spoke. Her voice even, not soft, not harsh. "You said yesterday you came here to understand." She didn't look at him. "I did," he answered, "and meant it." "So?" she asked, pulling up another scoop of dirt. "What exactly are you trying to understand?" He paused. The question wasn't simple. She had a way of speaking that cut through everything unnecessary. He set the digger aside for a moment, wiped his brow with his sleeve, and looked out over the fields. The land rolled gently, golden where the grass dried under summer heat, richer green where the soil held water longer. Wind traced patterns across it like memory moving slowly through time. "My father," he said quietly, "believed that land was an investment, something to acquire, develop, expand, convert, monetize. Everything was a number. Everything was scale. Everything had to grow." Claire listened. Her movement slowed, not stopped. She would never stop working just to talk, but slowed enough to show she was listening fully. "And you?" she asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. The wind shifted, brushing his hair. "I used to believe the same thing," he admitted. "Or I thought I did. I built my life on it. Built my company. Built my reputation. And I was good at it. Very good." He laughed, a short, dry sound without humor. "But somewhere along the way I didn't notice I was losing things. People, connections, time. The ability to stand still without feeling like something was wrong." Claire leaned back on her heels and finally looked at him. "You don't know how to rest," she said. It wasn't judgment. It was truth spoken simply. "No," he said, "I don't." Their eyes held for a moment. Not soft, not sentimental, but real. Then she picked up the digger again. "Well," she said, "you're in the right place to learn." They worked until the sun dipped lower. The air cooled, shadows stretched longer, The fields shifted from gold to amber to deepening copper. When they finally straightened, the new fence post stood upright, firm, solid. They didn't congratulate themselves. They didn't need to. They simply stood there for a moment, quiet, breathing in the dusk. Claire wiped her hands on her jeans and started walking back toward the house. "You did better than I thought you would," she said. He blinked. It wasn't flattery, wasn't teasing, wasn't a compliment. Really, it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement meant something. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once, the closest she ever got to smiling. When they reached the yard, Scout ran ahead, barking excitedly, chasing nothing in particular except the joy of being alive. Claire leaned down and ruffled his fur. Ethan watched her. He didn't try to hide it. The porch light flicked on automatically as daylight thinned. The farmhouse window glowed warm from the inside. The world felt slower here, and strangely, fuller. Claire turned to him. "You should head back before it gets too dark. Roads out here don't have lights. Hard to see where the gravel shifts." He nodded. Something inside him resisted the idea of leaving, but he didn't push. He walked to his truck, opened the door, paused. "Claire." She looked up, one hand shading her eyes from the last streak of sun. "Yeah?" He swallowed. The words felt heavier than they should have. "Thank you. For today." She held his gaze. Something flickered. Faint, unreadable. "Get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow'll be harder." He smiled, for the first time in a long time. Small, real, unguarded. "I'll be here," he said. "I know," she replied. Not hopeful, not resigned, just factual. He got into the truck and drove away. The road dust rose behind him, catching the last fading light, and Claire stood there, arms folded loosely, watching until he disappeared down the long stretch of gravel. Her face unreadable to anyone else, but to herself, she knew. She felt something shift today. Not acceptance, not trust. Something smaller. Something like the beginning of being willing to see who he might be. She turned back toward the house, Scout trotting at her heels. Inside, the lights glowed warm. The night settled gently. Crickets began their song. And somewhere down that long road, Ethan drove through a silence he didn't fear for the first time in years. The next morning broke heavy and blue, the kind of light that comes before full dawn. The world still half asleep, holding its breath. Mist clung low to the fields, thick enough to soften the shapes of fences and trees, turning everything ghost-like and quiet. The air was cool, damp against the skin, carrying the smell of wet earth and clover. Claire was already outside when Ethan drove up. She had a bucket of feed in one hand and a rope in the other. Scout trotted at her heel, tail swinging in lazy arcs. She didn't look surprised to see him, but she didn't greet him either. She simply noticed his truck rolling in and continued walking toward the barn. He parked beside the fence again. The gravel crunched under his boots as he stepped out. His body was sore, badly sore. But there was something clean about the ache, something honest, something earned. He caught up beside her. "Morning," he said. She didn't glance over, but her voice was softer than yesterday. Not warm, not welcoming, just softer. "Morning." They walked together in silence until the barn doors came into view. Fog curled around the roof, around the trees. The world felt smaller, closer. "How are your hands?" she asked. He held them up slightly. The skin across his palms was blistered and raw, some spots cracked. "Red, still attached," he said. A small sound, almost a laugh, escaped her. "Not quite. More like the shadow of one. You'll need tape," she said. "And gloves that actually fit you. Those old ones in the barn are my dad's. They're too big for your hands." He blinked. He hadn't realized she'd noticed that. They reached the barn and she handed him the rope. "Take Willow," she said. "The gray mare. Gentle as they come. We'll move the herd to the north pasture. More grass there after the rain." He followed her inside. The smell of hay and animal warmth wrapped around them. The horses shifted softly, snorting clouds of breath into the chilly air. Claire opened a stall and stroked Willow's neck. The mare leaned into her touch, trusting. "You talk to them," Ethan said quietly. Claire didn't look at him, still running her hand along the mare's jaw. "They listen," she replied. She passed him the lead rope. Their fingers brushed just for a second. Nothing dramatic, nothing staged, but it was enough. Enough to make both of them aware of the closeness between them. Enough to make silence feel heavier. He took Willow out into the field while Claire moved ahead to open the pasture gate. The fog swirled around them, catching on their clothes, settling in their hair. For a while, they worked without speaking. Just movement, just breathing, just presence. When the horses were settled in the new pasture, Claire leaned against the fence, arms draped loosely over the top rail, watching them graze. The sky was beginning to lighten. Streaks of pale gold under soft violet clouds. "Your father taught you all this," Ethan said quietly, stepping beside her. She nodded. He believed everything had a rhythm. The seasons, the herd, the land. He said the world'll tell you what it needs if you shut up long enough to listen. Ethan watched her profile. The way the light touched the edges of her hair, the way her expression softened when she looked at the fields. "What did he expect you to do with the farm?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Her throat worked. She swallowed. "He expected me to keep it alive," she said, voice low. "To care for it. To carry it forward. To never let it die." Her grip on the fence tightened. White knuckles. Breath held. "But life isn't always built to match promises," she murmured. Ethan turned to face her. "How bad is it?" he asked. And there was no strategy in the question. No negotiation. Just human concern. She exhaled slowly, like something inside her had been waiting to crack for a long time. "Bad enough," she said. "The bank's patient until it isn't. Equipment breaks faster than I can fix it. Feed prices keep climbing. And without the South Field producing like it used to..." She stopped. The silence was sharp. He waited. Not pushing. Not probing. Just waiting. Claire's voice came quiet. "If I lose the farm, I lose more than land. I lose the last piece of my father, the last piece of my mother, the last place where I still know who I am." Ethan's chest tightened. A physical pain, real and deep. He understood. God, he understood. He had lost his father while the man was still alive beside him. Lost him to ambition, to emptiness, to a life that devoured itself. "That's not something you can fix with money," Claire finished, wiping a hand across her cheek. "Not tears, just exhaustion." "I didn't offer money," he said softly. She looked at him then, really looked, eyes searching his. "No," she said, "you didn't." Their breath mingled in the cold morning air. A hawk cried somewhere overhead. The grass whispered. The horses grazed. Claire pushed away from the fence. "Come on," she said. "We've got more work to do." She walked ahead. And for the first time, truly the first time, Ethan didn't follow because he had a reason. He followed because he wanted to, because something was happening. Here, something slow, something fragile, something rooted, not love, not yet, but the soil it could grow in had just begun to turn. They spent the next hours working, on the orchard fence line behind the barn. The sun had risen by then, burning off the last of the fog, leaving the world bright and wide and without hiding places. The orchard wasn't large. 20 or so old apple trees, branches twisted with age, their leaves whispering softly when the breeze passed through. The grass here was taller, dotted with tiny white flowers that swayed like scattered stars fallen to earth. Claire moved with purpose, always knowing exactly where to place her hands, where to step, what tool to reach for without thinking. Ethan followed her lead, not asking questions unless he needed to, learning quietly, watching the way she used her strength without forcing it, the way she worked with the land, not against it, not domination, not control, but cooperation. That was new to him, completely new. He was used to conquering, to bending things into shape, to pushing until the world yielded. Here, the world didn't bend, I did. After an hour of quiet work, Claire spoke. Just a few words, like she was saying something obvious. You fight the job too much. Ethan looked up from the fence post he was struggling to angle correctly. I'm what? You're trying to force the post into the ground, she said, stepping closer, adjusting his hands. You're using pure muscle, but the earth doesn't respond to brute strength. You have to feel where it wants to open. He blinked at her. Feel where the ground wants to open? He repeated, a trace of skepticism in his tone. She gave him a look, not annoyed, not patronizing, just level. Yes. She knelt and showed him, gently twisting the post, pressing down not with his arms but with the weight of his body, using gravity and angle instead of force. The post slid half an inch deeper with almost no resistance. Ethan stared. Okay, he admitted. That's actually smarter than what I was doing. Claire's mouth shifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. Something light around the edges. You don't win against land, she said. You learn to listen to it. Ethan tried the movement again. Slower, more controlled. It worked. Claire watched, and for the first time since he arrived, something like approval flickered in her eyes. Better, she said. The word landed in him like something warm. No one had said that to him in years, not without expecting something in return. They worked like that for a long while, talking only when needed, falling easily into silence, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, wasn't tense, wasn't awkward, just shared. At one point he glanced sideways at her. She was standing under one of the apple trees, sunlight catching the auburn in her hair, her expression distant. Not sad, but remembering something private, something held just beneath the surface. He didn't ask. He didn't want to break whatever it was she was holding, but she spoke anyway. This was my mother's favorite spot, she said, touching the bark of the tree gently. She used to sit here in the afternoons. Said the world sounded softer under these branches. Ethan stepped closer, slowly, like approaching something sacred. What was she like? He asked. Claire's face changed. In that fragile way grief changes a face. Not a collapse, just a shift, a quieting. She was warm, Claire said. Not loud, not bold, just steady. She knew how to make things grow. Plants, animals, people. She didn't rush life. She let it unfold. Her hand stayed on the tree, fingers grazing the rough bark. She got sick 2 years after Dad passed, she said quietly. I tried to take care of her myself, told the doctors we didn't need to move her anywhere else. She wanted to stay here, so I made sure she did. The orchard was very still, only the leaves whispered. Ethan's chest tightened, his breath stilled. She didn't look at him when she spoke the last part. Like I'm too small for the life I chose. He stepped forward, but slowly, letting her see every inch of movement. Claire, he murmured, needing help isn't weakness. Her eyes lifted, and there it was. The truth beneath every sharp edge she'd thrown at him since the moment he arrived. She wasn't defending the farm from him. She was defending herself from the idea of being saved, because once, someone had let her fall, and no one had caught her. Maybe not for you, she said, but for me. Asking means admitting I'm alone. The last word hit him like a blow, not because of what it meant for her, but because he recognized it. In himself. He took a breath, steadying himself, and then stepped closer, just enough that she could move away if she wanted. She didn't. You don't have to ask, he said. I'm offering, not because you can't do it, but because no one should carry everything alone. Her throat worked. Her voice, when it came, was rough. Why are you really here, Ethan? He froze. There it was. The question he'd been running from since the first step on the porch. The truth hovered under his tongue like something sharp. Because your father wrote to me before he died. Because he asked me to make sure you didn't lose this place. Because I owe him my life, because I am not here by accident. But he wasn't ready to say it, not yet, not when her guard was down, not when trust had only just begun to flicker between them. So he answered the only part he could say honestly. I'm here, he said slowly, because I needed to learn how to stay. Claire didn't fully understand that answer, but she didn't reject it either. Something in her softened, only a fraction, but enough. She looked away first, taking a small, uneven breath. You can help with the roof tomorrow, she said. If you want. Ethan nodded. I want. They didn't touch. They didn't speak again. But something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough. Two people, still bruised, still uncertain, but no longer standing on opposite sides of the same silence. That evening, the farm slipped into twilight the way a tired body sinks into sleep. Slowly, gently, without resistance. The sky dimmed from gold to rose, then to a deep violet that stretched endlessly over the fields. The first stars emerged pale and uncertain, like shy children stepping into a room. Claire lit the lanterns on the porch one by one, their warm amber glow spreading softly across the weathered wood. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of hay, earth after sun, and the distant whisper of night insects waking. Ethan watched her from the steps, boots unlaced, arms resting loosely on his knees. He had seen her work all day, seen her move like someone who belonged to this place, whose muscles held the memory of every fence post, every ridge, every blade of grass. But now, in the lamplight, she looked different, lighter, or maybe just unguarded, for the first time. Claire set the last lantern down, exhaled, and leaned against the railing, looking out at the darkening yard. Night on the farm hits fast, she said quietly. He nodded, eyes still on her. It's peaceful, he said. She gave a small, wry smile. Most nights. Ethan didn't ask what the other nights were like. Some silences are meant to hold stories, not break them. For a while, they simply stood there, listening to crickets, to the far-off croak of a bullfrog near the pond, to the soft hum of a world settling into itself. Claire sat down on the top step. After a moment, Ethan sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. Not too close, not too far, comfortable. He looked up at the sky. You can see so many more stars out here than in the city. Cities are loud, Claire murmured. In every way. Too much noise, too much rush, too many places to be and never enough time to actually arrive anywhere. He glanced at her. You've been? She nodded. I went to college in Atlanta. 1 semester. I thought that was where my life was supposed to happen. The world was big, and I wanted to be part of it. Then why did you come back? Claire was quiet a long time before she answered. When my father died, the world got very small again. Suddenly it wasn't about who I wanted to become. It was about who needed me to stay. The words slid through the dark, soft but heavy. Ethan let them settle. You didn't choose this place, he said softly. It was chosen for you. She didn't deny it, but she didn't agree either. Sometimes life doesn't ask what you want, she said. It just hands you something and waits to see what you'll do with it. Ethan's throat tightened. Because if anyone understood that, he did. His father had shaped every inch of him, from the way he stood to the way he negotiated, to the certainty that emotion was weakness and vulnerability was a debt you could never repay. Even now, years after the man's death, Ethan still moved like someone braced for a blow. Claire's fingers brushed the worn wood of the step. You know, she said quietly, most people think owning land is romantic, peaceful. But this place, it asks for everything. Your time, your back, your sleep, your bones, your heart. You give, and sometimes it still takes more. Ethan looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't just tired. She was holding the world up by hand. Claire, he said slowly, no one should have to hold that alone. She didn't turn to him, but her voice softened. You said that today, too. Because it's true. The silence that followed wasn't sharp this time. It was warm, like low embers in a fireplace. Claire drew in a breath, then exhaled, steady and slow. "What about you?" she asked. "What did life hand you that you never asked for?" Ethan didn't answer right away. His voice when it came was quiet, unforced. "My father built an empire," he said. "From nothing. People admired him for it, respected him, feared him, but they never really saw him. They saw what he'd built. I grew up in that shadow. Everything I did had to be worthy of his name. And was it?" she asked gently. Ethan stared out into the dark. "No," he said. "Not to him. Nothing was ever enough." Claire didn't offer pity, didn't apologize, didn't try to fix the wound. She simply sat with him in it. That, somehow, was more intimate than touch. After a long moment, she stood and disappeared into the kitchen. Ethan stayed where he was, letting the night become a second skin. When she returned, she was carrying 2 mugs, chipped and mismatched, filled with something steaming. She handed him one. He didn't ask what it was. He didn't need to. She sat beside him again. Their shoulders didn't touch, but they were close enough now that if either of them leaned even a fraction of an inch, the space between them would collapse entirely. The stars brightened overhead. Their breaths fogged faintly in the cooling air. And then, softly, without any ceremony, Claire began to hum a small, low melody. Old, maybe something her mother used to hum at dusk. Ethan closed his eyes, and for the first time in a very, very long time, the silence did not feel like something he needed to fill. It felt like home. They didn't speak again before going inside. They didn't need to. When they parted for the night, the door closed softly behind them, and the world stayed hushed and gentle. Something had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. 2 separate lives had begun to slope, slowly, quietly, toward the same horizon, and neither of them pulled away. The next morning began with a heavy stillness, the kind that doesn't belong to a normal day. The air felt thick, heavier than usual, and even the birds sounded muted, as if they sensed something coming. A storm was building somewhere beyond the tree line, still unseen but undeniable. The sky had lost its early clear blue and settled into a flat, tense gray, as though the world was holding its breath. Claire noticed it immediately. Storms mattered on a farm, not just as weather, but as threat and work and preparation. She stepped onto the porch, rubbing her arms against a faint chill, eyes scanning the sky. "Storm's rolling in," she said. Ethan came to stand beside her, squinting upward. "How can you tell?" She didn't answer right away. She didn't have to. The air spoke for her. It hummed. The leaves on the orchard trees had turned their pale undersides to the sky, showing their readiness to be beaten by rain. The wind wasn't moving, not really. It was waiting. "You learn to feel it," she finally said. Ethan believed her. They had intended to work on the roof that day. But storms didn't ask permission, and timing meant everything. So instead, they moved quickly around the farm, securing tools, pulling tarps over the tractor, closing the barn windows, making sure the animals were sheltered. Claire moved fast, sharp, decisive. Storms made her efficient, precise. Ethan followed her lead without question. And somewhere between the chicken coop and the hay shed, something clicked again. The same quiet teamwork they'd found yesterday in the orchard. No one explained. No one commanded. They just moved together, adjusting to each other's rhythm the way 2 dancers might learn the same steps without speaking. By the time the first growl of thunder rolled across the sky, long and low, they were at the barn doors, pushing them closed against the rising wind. Then the rain came, not soft, not gentle, but sudden. A sharp, heavy downpour like a curtain of water thrown from the sky all at once. It hammered the metal roof of the barn. It drenched the yard in seconds. It turned soil into dark, slick earth. Claire pushed a loose strand of wet hair out of her face and exhaled hard. "Well," she said, catching her breath, "that's going to make everything harder tomorrow." Ethan laughed. A short, breathless sound, but real. At least we finished the fence. At least that, she agreed. They stood in the open barn doorway, watching rain fall in sheets across the farm. The world blurred into softened edges and dull silver tones. It was beautiful. Claire leaned against the doorway, crossing her arms loosely. Ethan leaned beside her, close enough to feel her presence, but not close enough to touch. "You're different from what I expected," she said suddenly. He turned his head slightly. "What did you expect?" Claire didn't soften the truth. A rich man who came here to play farmer for a week. Someone who would talk too loud, try too hard, and leave the moment things got uncomfortable. He was quiet for a moment. "That's who I've been," he said. She turned her head, looking at him fully now. "But not who you are?" "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. The rain thundered on the roof. The wind pushed hard against the barn doors. Claire's expression shifted. Not to pity, not to sympathy, but to understanding. The kind that comes from recognizing a truth you've lived yourself. We don't always know who we are until life stops letting us pretend, she said. Quietly, Ethan looked at her like that sentence had just shifted something inside him. But before he could respond, lightning flashed, bright and clean, followed by a crack of thunder that shook the barn walls. "Power's probably out already," Claire muttered, pushing away from the doorway. "Come on, we should check the old generator." They moved through the barn, the smell of hay rich and damp in the storm-thick air. The generator was housed in a small shed attached to the back wall, quiet and still. Claire knelt and attempted to start it manually. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. Ethan crouched beside her. "Here, let me try." She passed him the starter rope without argument, rare in itself. Her eyes focused, jaw tense. He gripped the handle, pulled. The machine coughed once, then died again. Claire cursed under her breath, low and unfiltered. Ethan tried again, slower this time, remembering the orchard. "Don't force. Feel." The generator sputtered, caught, then roared to life. Claire exhaled. Not relief, exactly, but release, a loosening of something wound too tight. "Thanks," she said. Ethan didn't smile, didn't make a joke, didn't turn the moment into something it wasn't. "You're welcome." The rain continued to slam against the barn, but inside, with the soft rumble of the generator, the world felt smaller, more contained, almost safe. Almost. Claire sat on a bale of hay. Ethan sat on another across from her. A few feet of space, but not empty space. Her fingertips traced the edge of the bale absently. "You want to know the truth?" she said, her voice lower now. "Sometimes I think this place is going to break me. Some days I think it already has. I don't know how to keep holding on when every week there's something new to fix, something expensive to replace, another piece falling apart faster than I can catch it." She laughed. But the sound wasn't mirth. It was exhaustion. "This farm is all I have left of them," she said. "If I lose it, I lose them all over again." Ethan's chest ached, not sympathy. Recognition. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice steady. "You won't lose it." Her eyes lifted. "How do you know?" "Because your father asked me to keep you safe, because I promised him I would." But he didn't say that. Not yet. Not while trust was still this fragile. Instead, he said the closest truth he could speak without breaking the moment. "Because you haven't let go," he said. "And you don't strike me as someone who gives up, even when it hurts." Her lips parted, soft, almost disbelieving. "You believe that?" He held her gaze. "Yes." Lightning lit the barn again. But neither of them flinched this time. Not from the storm. Outside. Not from the storm between them. For the first time, they weren't carrying their weight alone. The rain softened to a steady rhythm. The air cooled. Their breathing fell into the same pace. No confessions, no promises, no touch, just two people, sitting across from each other, letting the walls come down one layer at a time. And sometimes, That is where intimacy begins, not in the reaching, but in the choosing not to run. The storm didn't pass quickly. It dragged itself across the valley for 2 more days, moving like something old and heavy and unwilling to leave. The rain loosened the soil until it turned to deep mud. The orchard leaves hung weighted and dripping, and the air smelled of wet wood and earth. The sky stayed low and bruised, pressing down. Inside the farmhouse everything was dim but warm. Oil lamps glowed softly in the rooms, casting amber halos against the walls. The generator hummed steadily, its constant low sound becoming a kind of heartbeat for the house. Ethan had never been in a place so quiet and steady while the world outside roared. On the second evening, Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, a jar of honey open beside her, slowly scooping it into smaller jars to sell at the market once the storm let up. Her hair was tied loosely, strands falling around her face. The soft lamplight made her look softer too, almost tender, though she still carried that quiet weight in her shoulders. Ethan was fixing a drawer in the cabinet, having removed it and set it on the table. The wood was old, swollen from years of humidity and repairs stacked on top of repairs. He sanded the edges carefully, slowly, not forcing anything. "I didn't expect you to know how to do that," Claire said after a while, nodding toward the drawer. "I didn't," Ethan admitted, "but I watched a video once years ago, and I've broken enough things in my life to know how to handle them more carefully the second time." She looked at him for a moment, really looked. There was something unreadable in her gaze. "You're gentler than you look," she said, quietly. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes softened, almost like an admission. "Not always," he said. She returned her focus to the honey, though her hands moved slower now. The storm thundered again, rattling the windows just faintly. The quiet stretched, not empty, not cold, but waiting for something to be said. Claire broke it first. "You learned to slow down," she said, not as a question. "Here, on this farm." "Yes," he said. "And you're not done learning yet." "No." Her voice dropped just slightly. "And some things you haven't told me." Ethan's hand froze mid-motion. The room did not feel warm anymore. He didn't look up at first. Instead, he focused on the rough wood under his fingertips, grounding himself in one small, solid thing. Because if he lifted his head too quickly, something in him knew he might break the entire moment. Claire didn't speak again. She didn't push. She didn't demand. She just waited. Waiting hurt worse than any accusation could have. Ethan let the breath in his chest escape. Slow, controlled, fragile. "There are things about why I came here," he said carefully, "that I haven't explained." Claire's hands stilled around the honey jar. Not tense, just still. "Then explain," she said. Her tone wasn't hard. It was worse than hard. It was steady, honest, open, and he wasn't ready. Not yet. If he said it now, when trust was still tender and forming, it would tear too deeply. He needed time. Just a little more. "I will," he said softly. "But not yet. Not tonight. I need to say it right, and I need you to hear it right." Claire's jaw tightened. Just a flicker, barely noticeable. "But there. You think the truth needs timing?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes it does." She didn't look away from him. Her eyes were so steady it hurt to meet them. "My father taught me," Claire said slowly, "that truth spoken too late is just another kind of lie." That sentence hit him like a fist to the sternum, not because she was wrong, but because she was right. He bowed his head. "I know," he whispered. Silence filled the kitchen again, but this silence was different now. It wasn't warm or gentle or soft, it was thin and sharp. A silence that had edges. Claire didn't leave. She didn't lash out. She didn't raise her voice. That would have been easier, almost welcome, something loud to break against, but she simply continued scooping honey, jar by jar, and it broke him in a way yelling never could. After a long while, she spoke again, very quietly. Do you know what it feels like to hold everything together with your bare hands? To wake up every day wondering if today is the day something in your life snaps, and then you snap with it? To feel like if anyone knew how close you were to falling apart, they'd walk away? Ethan's throat closed. Yes, he said, but his voice was so quiet he didn't know if she heard him. Claire didn't look up. Then don't lie to me, she whispered. He flinched. Not visibly, but inside. The drawer in his hand suddenly felt too heavy. He set it down carefully. He stood. She didn't. He crossed the kitchen very slowly, like approaching an injured animal, or someone holding their grief together by sheer force of will. Claire, he murmured. She didn't look up. He knelt in front of her. Her breath hitched, almost imperceptible. His voice came out low, rough, unguarded. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. Whatever else is true, that part is real. I need you to believe that. Her hands trembled, just once. Then she finally met his eyes. The look she gave him was not trust. It was not forgiveness. Was not soft. It was a wound held carefully in place. I believe you don't want to hurt me, she said. But that doesn't mean you won't. He felt those words like a blade. And she was right. Something moved outside. The wind rattling the porch swing. A reminder that the world was still turning. Storms still breaking. Time still moving forward whether they were ready or not. Ethan lowered his gaze. I'll tell you, he whispered. Soon. Claire nodded once. Not agreement, acknowledgement. The smallest distance between two people, and the greatest. The storm finally passed on the third morning. It didn't leave softly. It simply grew tired of itself and drifted east, leaving behind a damp, shining world, fields glistening with new water, branches heavy with droplets, soil dark and rich. The air was sharp and clean, like something had been washed inside it. Claire stepped outside just after sunrise, boots sinking slightly in the softened ground. She breathed it in, the smell of wet leaves, of earth, of something renewed. Ethan followed a few minutes later, his jacket thrown over his shoulders, hair still damp from washing up. He paused at the porch, watching her for a moment. There was a peace to her like this, when she didn't notice she was being seen. She walked toward the pasture fence, toward where the land rose gently into the orchard. Her steps were slow, not tired, thoughtful. Ethan joined her silently. They didn't speak at first. The world was too new and quiet to break. Finally, Claire said, Storm's good for the apples. They'll drink this for days. He nodded. And the roof? We'll patch it today, before the next rain finds the same holes. He looked at her profile, steady, composed, practical, holding her strength like something she had learned, not something she was born with. They went to work. The ladder was old but still steady enough. The shingles had rotted in places where water had been leaking slowly for months, maybe years. Claire worked barefoot, balanced like she had done this 100 times. Ethan worked beside her, tools in hand, movement careful, deliberate. For a while, they were simply two bodies moving in tandem. The work required focus, and they didn't need to speak to communicate. But inside that silence, something waited, the conversation that hadn't happened, the truth still held back. A branch snapped in the orchard behind them. Just a deer, probably, but both of them flinched. The world was no longer soft. After they finished the last row of shingles, Claire sat on the roof edge, legs dangling over the side, watching the fields. The sun was warm but not harsh. The air smelled of damp wood. Ethan sat beside. Her quiet held them. But it was no longer the gentle quiet of earlier nights. This was the quiet before. Something breaks. Claire didn't look at him when she spoke. You said you'd tell me soon. He felt the words in his chest, heavy, weighted, inevitable. I know, he said. You said you needed to say it. Right. Yes. And to say it when I was ready to hear it. Yes. Claire finally looked at him. Her eyes were not Angry. That was worse. They were steady. Ethan, I am listening now. The world beneath them stilled. The wind slowed. Birdsong faded. The sunlight itself seemed to hold. He opened his mouth, and then, from below, Claire! Both of them turned. A truck had pulled into the yard. Mud splattered, loud, familiar. A man swung out of the driver's seat. Broad shoulders, work-worn hands, a face that carried history. Claire. Froze. Ethan didn't know. Him. But he didn't need to. He knew exactly who the man was. Not because of how he looked, but because of the way Claire's breath stilled in her chest. Michael, she whispered. The name did not need explanation, and a X isn't hard to recognize when the memory is still close enough to touch. Michael didn't look up at first. He walked toward the porch, calling again. Claire? You out here? Claire climbed off the roof carefully, boots in hand. Ethan followed slower. They reached the ground just as Michael spotted them. He stopped walking. His eyes moved from Claire to Ethan, to Claire again. The silence held something sharp now. Didn't expect to see you with company, Michael said, voice flat but charged. Claire didn't flinch. This is Ethan. He's helping with repairs. Michael nodded slowly. Too slowly. Right. Helping. Ethan didn't move. Michael's gaze settled on him fully now. You from around here? He asked. No, Ethan answered calmly. Then what brings you to a farm in the middle of nowhere? Ethan didn't speak, because Claire spoke first. He's renting the guest room, she said. Michael raised a brow, a quiet sitting heavy under it. Then he dropped the blow without raising his voice. And that's all? Just renting a room? The words were sharp, but the danger was not in what was said. It was in what was implied. Ethan felt Claire stiffen beside him. He didn't step closer, but he did not step away. Michael exhaled, shaking his head. You don't have to do this, Claire. You don't have to pretend everything is fine. I told you months ago, I can help. I want to help. You shouldn't be doing all this alone. Claire's jaw tightened. We've talked about this. No, Michael corrected softly. Stepping closer, you shut down the conversation before it could start. Silence. Claire's. Hands curled around her boots, knuckles pale. I didn't want charity, she said. Michael's expression cracked. A flash of pain. It wasn't charity. It was us, he said. The life we were building. Claire closed her eyes, just once, a single blink that held 100 buried hurts. That life ended, she said. Because you ended it, Michael replied, not angry, just honest. Because you wouldn't let anyone stand beside you. Something inside Claire's stillness trembled, but her voice didn't break. I had to learn how to survive alone. No, Michael said gently. You just learned how to suffer quietly. That sentence hit like a stone dropped in deep water. No, splash, just sinking. The silence that followed was excruciating. And then, it happened. Not loudly, not dramatically, but devastatingly. Michael turned to Ethan and said the sentence that changed everything. You're Ethan Hale, aren't you? The world stopped. The air froze. Claire looked at Ethan, slowly, as if afraid of what she would see when her eyes reached his. Ethan didn't breathe. Michael continued, unaware of the devastation he was causing simply by knowing the truth. The CEO, Hale Industries. The one who— Stop, Ethan said. Too late. Claire stumbled back a step. Her voice was barely sound. You're Hale? He didn't move, didn't explain, didn't soften. She stared at him, betrayal spreading through her expression like ink in water. You told me you didn't come here to fix things, she whispered. You told me you weren't here to save me. Ethan swallowed, throat tight enough to hurt. I came because— No, she said, not loudly, but with a finality that shook him. You came because you already knew I was drowning. The wind moved through the orchard. The world was unbearably quiet. And Claire, who had held everything alone for so long, finally let something inside her break, not outwardly, not in tears, but in her eyes. She took one step back, then another. Then she turned and she walked away, not fast, not dramatic, just far enough that he couldn't follow without shattering something sacred. Ethan didn't call after her, because some wounds do not want to be chased. They want to be honored, and left space to breathe. The days after Claire walked away did not explode with drama. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no spectacle, just quiet. A quiet so heavy it felt like weather, thick and unmoving. Ethan stayed on the farm the rest of that day, but he did not see her again. Claire did not come to dinner. He didn't knock on her door. He didn't follow her into the orchard. He didn't try to force apologies into spaces where they didn't fit yet. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table that night, hands clasped, eyes on the chipped wood, and felt something he had not felt in years. Maybe ever. Regret. Not like guilt. Not like damage control. Not like brand protection or strategy. Real regret. Human-shaped, painfully, simple. He had wanted to protect her. But instead, he had become the person she now needed protection from. He stayed until dawn, then left. No goodbye note. No explanation. Just space. Because sometimes staying is pressure, and space is mercy. Claire spent that day in the orchard, not working, not crying, just breathing. She walked row after row of apple trees, warm, bare now in late season, branches dark and twisted against the pale sky. The world felt hollow, like sound had gone missing. Her footsteps were the only noise. She didn't think in sentences. She didn't try to rationalize. Her body remembered everything before her mind could shape it. His laugh on the porch, his hands steady on the ladder, the way his eyes softened when she spoke about her mother, the silence that felt safe when they stood in the rain, the way he listened, really listened, without trying to fix her. None of that was false. None of that was performative. And yet, there was an invisible truth sitting beneath all of it, like a root system she had never seen until she tripped on it. He had known who she was, what she was losing, how close to breaking she was, and he had stepped into the space she guarded most, not lying, but not revealing, and she, foolishly, had let herself open. Claire leaned her forehead against the rough bark of an apple tree and exhaled, low and trembling. The heartbreak wasn't loud. It was quiet, the kind that sits behind the ribs and waits. Michael didn't stay long. He apologized, not for revealing Ethan's identity, but for arriving at all, for stepping back into a place that was no longer his to stand. Claire didn't answer him. He left anyway, because some closures are one-sided. 3 weeks passed, not fast, not slow. Just time, measured in chores. Fix the fences. Check the water line. Feed the cattle. Pay the overdue property tax notice. Ignore the foreclosure letter. Don't think about Ethan. Don't think about Ethan. Don't think about Ethan. Not the CEO. Not the man with the empire. Not the one who could buy her land with a single phone call. The man who helped patch the roof, the man who laughed when she burned the eggs. The man who stayed up late shelling peas just because she mentioned they needed to be done. The man who didn't try to rescue her. The man who only tried to stand beside her. Those two men were the same. She didn't know how to reconcile that, so she didn't try. She just worked until the orchard floor froze, until winter grazed the edges of the fields, until the ache dulled into something she could live with. Back in the city, Ethan did not return to his old life. He went to work. He attended board meetings. He reviewed quarterly reports. He made decisions that rippled across markets, but he didn't feel present for any of it. His office was a high rise of glass, overlooking a skyline of steel and ambition. But the view felt wrong now, like a mural instead of a window. The city was loud, fast, endless, but he found himself missing the sound of gravel under boots, missing silence that didn't swallow him, missing a place where people looked at you, not at what you could do for them. His assistant noticed first. "You haven't been to a single networking dinner," she said one evening, her voice cautious, not prying, just observing. "Investors are beginning to ask questions." Ethan didn't look up from the report in front of him. "They'll survive. For now," she said. Then, after a pause, "You have been different. Since you came back." He exhaled slowly. "Yes," he said. She waited, because good assistants know when there is more, but he didn't say anything else because he didn't know how to say it. "How do you explain that the world you built, the world you fought for, bled for, defined yourself through, feels suddenly too small? How do you explain that wealth no longer tasted like power? That success no longer looked like control? That ambition without someone to share silence with was just noise?" He didn't have the words yet, but something in him was shifting, not melting, not breaking, rearranging. Spring came late that year. The snow melted in thin, muddy sheets. The ground thawed slowly. The orchard woke reluctantly, first buds small and shy. Claire walked the rows with pruning shears, trimming back what winter had taken. Her breath was visible in the cold air, her fingers numb inside worn leather gloves. She didn't think about Ethan every day, but she thought about him enough to know something unfinished still lived between them. Not a wound, a door, still open, still waiting, still hers to approach or leave behind. Claire stopped beneath the old apple tree near the fence, the one she had leaned against the night it rained. She brushed her fingertips along the bark, and then she heard it, the sound of a car turning up the gravel road. Slow, steady, not hesitant, but not claiming the road like it owned it. Claire's breath caught halfway in her chest. She didn't turn right away. She closed her eyes, because she knew. Before she looked, before she heard the engine stop, before she heard the door open, she knew. Turned. Ethan stood beside his car. Not in a suit, not polished, not armor-clad, just jeans, soft flannel, hands empty. Shoulders lowered. He had changed. Not his face, not his posture. Something in his eyes. He did not walk toward her quickly. He did not rush. He stepped carefully, the way one approaches something holy. When he reached her, he stopped a few feet away, close enough to hear her breathing, far enough to give her the choice. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "I didn't come to fix anything." She closed her eyes, just once. He continued, "I didn't come to ask forgiveness." Her throat tightened. "I didn't come to make an offer, or negotiate, or take anything from you." The orchard wind moved lightly through the branches. He swallowed, and his voice trembled just barely. "I came because I don't know who I am in the world without you in it." Her breath broke, not loud, but real. He took one step closer. Just one. "I can leave," he said softly, "if that is what you need." But I needed to say that out loud. To you. Not to the empty space where you used to stand. Claire didn't speak. Her fingers curled around her, pruning shears, knuckles pale. Then slowly, released, she stepped toward him. Not a run. Not a collapse. Just one step. Enough that the space between them no longer felt like distance. Her voice came out quiet, raw, true. "You should have trusted me with the whole truth." He nodded. "No defenses left." "Yes." She looked at him, at all the mistakes, and all the tenderness, and all the real in him. "And I should have trusted myself enough to let you." The wind passed between them. Not cold now, just moving. Ethan reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to say no. She didn't. Her hand found his. Their fingers laced, not urgently, but like something that had been waiting a long time to return home. It happened at dusk. The air was warm. The orchard smelled of new blossoms. Claire had gone to check the barn lights. Ethan was inside, preparing supper, hands moving slowly, comfortably, like he belonged here. Now then, the power flickered. Once, twice, then died. Ethan stepped outside to call to her. But the moment he opened the door, he smelled it. Smoke, not wood smoke, not fireplace ash, something. Sharp chemical, burning fast. Claire! He ran. She was already outside, running toward the cattle shed. Flames licking up the far side of the structure. Dry winter hay catching like it had been waiting for fire all year. The wind pushed the flames hard. Too hard. Claire grabbed the hose. It sputtered. Only a thin, useless stream. "The pump's not working," she shouted. The flames roared higher. Ethan didn't think. He just moved. He raced inside the barn, ignoring Claire's yell of his name, ignoring the heat slamming into him like a wall. He tore open the pen gates, slapping the terrified animals toward the open pasture. The fires snapped and howled around him, sparks catching in his shirt, stinging his skin. He didn't feel it. All he could hear was Claire's voice outside, tight with fear. "Ethan, get out. Get out, Ethan!" He got the last calf out, shoved it toward the pasture, and stumbled into the yard just as a support beam collapsed behind him in a shower of sparks. Claire caught his arm, dragging him away, both of them coughing, eyes stinging. By the time the volunteer fire crew arrived, half the barn was gone, but the animals were safe. Claire and Ethan stood in the field, breathing hard, faces streaked with smoke and ash. The fire glowed orange in the dimming sky. Terrible and beautiful and final. Ethan turned to her. She was shaking. Not from fear, from everything, from years of holding everything alone. From the barn, burning, from him running in, from knowing what that meant. She looked at him with eyes that finally saw the whole truth of who he was and who he had become. "You could have died," she whispered. Her voice cracked. One small, breaking note that said everything. Ethan didn't touch her face. He didn't pull her close. He let her come to him. Her forehead against his chest, hands gripping his shirt, like she was anchoring herself to something solid for the first time. "I didn't run in to save the barn," he said quietly, breath warm in her hair. "I ran in because you shouldn't have to lose anything alone ever again." Claire closed her eyes, tears slipping into the soot on her cheeks. The fire crackled behind them, but the worst was already over. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Her voice was soft, unshaking. "Stay. For real. Not as a guest, not as a fixer. Stay because this is where you choose to be." Ethan exhaled, and it sounded like something leaving him, something heavy he'd carried for years. "I choose you," he said. "Not the land, not the orchard, not redemption. Her." Claire nodded once. Slow. "Sure. Then we'll rebuild," she said. "Together. Not because he could fund it, not because she needed saving, but because love, real love, is not rescue. It's standing in the smoke, side by side, and deciding we go forward together." Ethan took her hand. The fire burned itself out behind them. The night grew quiet, and the orchard, even in loss, felt alive again.